Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about why I am so excited for the Retribution Paladin rework. Most of the time on this channel we're talking about guides, we're talking about what to do, how to, all this kind of stuff. We're talking about facts. This video is going to be more of just why I'm personally excited about it. If that's not for you, that's fine, you can skip this one. But I think to do this best, we should start with the story for anybody who's new, like how I even became playing Ret Paladin, right? So I started playing Ret Paladin in Legion. As far as endgame content, I made my Paladin that I currently use in Warlords of Draenor, but I didn't play endgame content in Warlords. I was very just casually doing my garrison crap and stuff. And I always say for anybody who, played casually in Warlords, it was probably actually kind of fun. At least it was for me, just doing my garrison stuff and, just putting on the basic PvP gear and stuff like that. It was actually kind of fun. But until then, I always played a warrior. Never played Paladin. Eventually, as the game progressed, everyone got everyone's abilities essentially, like in Mists of Pandaria, and warrior didn't really feel unique anymore. And Paladins felt like Paladin felt like an arms warrior. Ret Paladin did, and except for they had like all these other cool things like self healing and bubble and all this other kind of stuff that they could do. So I was like, well, as far as for soloing content and stuff like that, I'm gonna make a Ret Paladin and I'm gonna make it my new main. So I did. I ended up playing Holy Paladin a lot at first as far as rating goes, but I got invited to join a guild that was a very basic, like very early mythic guild, like only killing a couple bosses. It's the current guild I'm in now. It's kind of progressed and changed names and stuff, changed leadership. But I got recruited into it as a Ret Paladin because I had a couple good Ret Paladin parses, even though I was primarily healing. And so I joined or whatever, and I at least had healed endgame before on like alt characters, but I'd never played Ret at endgame before. So I did, and this would have been in Legion. And, I started, and that would have been starting, in not Nighthold, it might be Nighthold, whatever the second raid tier of Legion was. And, I was pretty bad. I'm not going to lie. I was just basically going off of, my feel. That's how I always played my warrior. But I started playing my warrior in vanilla, right? And so, like, I kind of knew how everything worked. And when something got updated, I would figure out how that worked. And so I didn't really need to look at a ton of guides to know what to do because I literally was there since day one. And I kind of learned with how it went, right? So I mistakenly thought that I'd be able to just know how Ret played and tried to play it. Honestly, I was doing really terrible. So that actually goes into why I started this. A big part of why I started this YouTube channel in general too was I was looking for guides on Ret Paladin stuff, and on YouTube they were all terrible. I was trying stuff. Some of the stuff just obviously didn't make sense to me. It was just like common sense that it was wrong, and so I ended up finding a written guide, and I always shout him out, Bolas on Wowhead. And his guide was actually really, really good. I used his guide and I immediately saw improvements. And that became like my base foundation of knowledge. Like my base foundation of knowledge of my warrior was back from vanilla. My foundation of knowledge came from like that written guide. And then I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to make my own YouTube video, my own YouTube guide about Ret Paladin stuff. Once I started like doing well, right? Parsing well, that kind of thing. I'm like, I'm going to do my own, video guide because I couldn't find any good PvE Ret videos when I was looking to learn how to play it. So that's why I kind of started doing that. So in Legion, I would say that the Legion version of me was so dramatically worse at like mythic rating than what I am right now. Even though I'm a few years older and stuff like that, I'm actually dramatically better now than I was then. More cognizant of everything, understanding of the intricacies of the spec, the intricacies of the class, the intricacies of mythic rating in general, the intricacies of now mythic plus in general, which I barely even participated in Legion. I'm a much better player now. However, my parses haven't necessarily gotten better over time. They've kind of stayed the same for the most part. In some ways gotten worse though, despite my skill level going up. And there's a big reason for that. And you might be like, why are you telling this long winding story? But it gets to why I'm so excited for this Ret Paladin rework. Now in Legion, we had something that was, quite the difference maker. And that was the auto bubble, the cheat death essentially, right? And no matter what, I was always taking this. There was a time where some Rets weren't taking it, at least for certain fights or certain content. I was always taking this, and it didn't matter. Cheat death means so much to me. It's like when you look at having that to where Ret Paladin is right now before this rework, where, as Blizzard said, we're basically the spec that dies the most in the game in all forms of content. Having that cheat death allows me to play a completely different way than what I currently play. And it's not by choice. It's just like, that's just the way I am. I don't know if it's my age or whatever. You know, I'm in my, now, I guess I'm almost mid-30s. And, you know, when I was young in games, like, when you ran out of lives, you game over. You know, sometimes you couldn't even save a game. I hate dying in video games. I hate dying in World of Warcraft. And the way I play is always exclusionary to dying. You know, despite Ret being one of the classes that dies the most, I probably die some of the least in my raid group. For example, like, I hate dying. I'll do whatever it takes to live. I'll pull off some amazing thing to live, right? Most of the time. Like, that's always my goal. I hate dying. And so being a really squishy spec and trying to do really good DPS, you know, that sometimes you know, that precludes you from doing good damage because you're focusing on not dying. Now, it's true, you can play overcautious as well. You can be like off healing when you should be DPSing, like off healing somebody else. But I'm mostly talking about just keeping myself alive, right? I'm not trying to do too much. I'm just trying to keep myself alive. You know, sometimes that means pulling holy power because I have to go do a mechanic, and if I don't heal myself, I'm going to die. You know, and you could say maybe the healer should baby me at that point, perhaps. But, you know, if it's going to be a kill pull, especially at progression, like, I just don't want to die there and like ruin everything for everyone else. So I do that. I pull my holy power. I'll use it to heal myself, and, you know, I miss out on, you know, multiple damage dealing abilities throughout the course of a fight. That leads me to be kind of more of like a, I always say, even in my guide videos, right? I'm like a 90 to 92 parser. That's kind of where I fit in when I have a good pull. You know, I'm going to probably parse somewhere around 92. Occasionally on like an early fight where there's a very low chance of me dying, whether that's the first boss of a mythic boss or whatever, then maybe then I'll get like a 99 or something like that. On those where there's pretty much zero chance that I'm going to die, allows me to play a lot freer. And in Legion, I did the same thing, right? So even though I was a learner, even though I was still a beginner, I was able to play so much more freely with that auto bubble. Now, we're not getting auto bubble back, at least not as of now, as Ret Paladins. However, we have all these kind of defensive abilities coming for our usage. So we're going to be able to keep our Shield of Vengeance. We're going to have Divine Protection, both on 1 minute cooldowns with the talent. And then we're also going to have the Guided Prayer or Sanctified Prayer, I can't remember what it's called, where if you go below 25% health, you heal yourself with a Word of Glory. That I consider that a defensive. I consider that almost a lay on hands, because the Healing Hands talent on the Paladin tree syncs up so well with that. It's basically going to be a lay on hands for yourself when you dip low in health. And it's not as good as Bubble, right? Because you could die, theoretically, right? You could, you know, and you know, if you go to 0% health, you're just dead, so it doesn't really help. But it's almost as good as that. And even if I have to lose a little bit of throughput to pick that Healing Hands talent to pair with the Prayer talent, I'm going to do that, because it's going to make that defensive so much stronger. Then, of course, you know, we have Sanctified Plates, which is just an overall, hey, my health is higher and I'm taking less damage from all the raid damage kind of thing as well. And, you know, it's why, you know, it kind of struck a nerve personally, honestly. In one of my videos, I mentioned, you know, how I think Sanctified Plates is going to get nerfed, and I do think it probably will still. But there are people saying, well, you're calling for nerfs for this. You're calling for nerfs. Why even mention nerfs? Man, it's just because, like, I don't want to lose everything else too. And I've kind of mentioned that before in a different video. But if Sanctified Plates goes live like this, there's a chance that, like, they take away that prayer talent, or they take away, you know, a different talent, and all of a sudden you're like, or they make you choose between Shield of Vengeance and Divine Protection again. And then, you know, a couple patches later or something, they still nerf Sanctified Plates anyways, right? So I'd rather just take my nerf up front, still have it be really good, still make it equal to, like, a really good defensive talent. Like, I don't know what, I'd have to look at every single spec and know, you know, what other people are getting with their talents. But I'd be happy with just, like, 5% avoidance. I'd still like to keep the 10% stamina, honestly. I think Ret Paladin's health is a little bit low. especially for a plate class. So I'd like to keep the stamina where it is. The armor doesn't really matter, so I'd keep the armor. But I'd be willing to sacrifice a little bit of that avoidance damage reduction. And even, you know, maybe drop it to 8%, whatever. I'd be willing to sacrifice some of that if it means keeping everything else. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to play the game without constantly worrying that I'm going to die. Now, I know some people are able to turn that off. I know some people are like, nope, I'm going to do my damage rotation, and if I die, that's the healer's fault. I cannot get my brain to switch into that mode. At the end of the day, I'm someone who says, if I die, it's my fault. What could I have done better? And sometimes the answer is I couldn't have done anything better, and it was the healer's fault. Sometimes that is just the answer. But like, I hate to like default to that. And so having all these abilities to press, you know, passively, like, or passively meaning like even the prayer talent, right? Knowing that goes off and it can happen once per minute as it is presently constructed. You know, every minute, you know, I can take a big mechanic to the face. I don't have to pull that holy power when I jump in. Example is the pillars on Jailer, right? So what ended up happening is, for my guild, we end up having to have our melee kind of do one of the harder pillars as far as like running distance, just because it just wasn't working out otherwise. I don't need to get into the details of it. But because of that, like, we'd also be kind of far away from the rest of the group, rest away from the healers. And for me, I found, you know, there's certain pillars that come up where there's other mechanics directly after them. And for any time that was the case, I had to pull some holy power. And as I jumped in and got hit by the pillar, I would then have to automatically heal myself with a word of glory, and then take the other mechanic hit, and then still be at like 10-20% health, and then keep DPSing. And it is stunk for sure to have to not only not use that holy power on DPSing, but keep that holy power pooled. So I essentially was losing out on, like, let's say 2 to 3 final verdicts, depending, usually like 2, but per time that happened, you know, and that's rough over the course of a fight, right? To lose those just because, you know, you're trying to stay alive essentially. But having this prayer talent would completely negate that, right? I was not getting one shot by the pillar. The pillar was taking me low. So let's say the pillar took me to, I jump in at 60%, the pillar takes me to 20%, whatever it is. Well, this thing heals me up to full. I take the other mechanic, and I never worry about it whatsoever. You know, it's just something that I would completely not have to worry about as a specific example. And, you know, that's something that I'm really looking forward to. I want all these defensive things to go through. I want to feel like I'm not completely squishy and actually go through a fight and just worry about my DPS rotation and worry about doing the most damage that I can do, without having to worry about all these other things. Like, oh crap, I don't have a button to press here, and unless a healer is currently targeting me, I'm probably going to die. I hate that feeling. I just do. And there's other people in the raid too that, you know, maybe, you know, they are close to dying too, and, you know, maybe they're the ones getting targeted or whatever. But yeah, so it's not always going to be me, even if one time it is me, even if like I get lucky and at one point someone is targeting me when I'm low and I get healed up before I die. And I have also, it's worth pointing out that I have tried, especially this expansion, where I'm like, I feel the most squishy I've ever felt as a Ret Paladin, and I've tried a couple times to maybe eke it out a little bit, and I've died more than I wanted to, and I had to just completely change. Senarth would be a good example of that, of a fight where I tried to be a bit greedy and it just wasn't working out for me. And I looked at some other Ret Paladin's logs on Senarth, and I will say this. On some of the top logs, some of you guys are very, very lucky. I see one in particular was the most egregious, right? So I'm watching the replay on the Warcraft logs, and one guy, one Ret, I mean, more power to him. I mean, this guy is a baller. He had an evoker healer following him for the entire raid. I actually just turned on his icon and the evoker's icon, and he followed him the entire raid. I assume just kind of heal botting him. He DPS'd all the way up the stairs every time instead of like taking warlock gates and stuff. Just DPS the spider, and the evoker healer would stand right behind him or right in front of him and would just heal him the whole time. At one point he gets hit by a tornado. The evoker healer just heals him through it, and, you know, it's all good. And, you know, I don't have that luxury, nor would I ask for that luxury personally. Again, that's not my personality to do something like that. But if you don't have that, if you don't have like a healer that's kind of like your buddy, or you have some kind of agreement, or they just baby you because it helps their HPS because you're always low on health or whatever. If you don't have that, then then you probably feel like me, where you feel pretty squishy, and you either probably die a lot, or maybe you're like me and your DPS has been suffering because you've been worrying about how to stay alive. I will say, for the most part, in Mythic Plus, I've been able to turn this off in some ways, and just do the damage, because having high damage in Mythic Plus is like if you don't have high damage, the other people, especially in like a pug, are gonna like flame you or stuff like that. But also just knowing all the mechanics of Mythic Plus, goes a long way too to staying alive. But pre-bubbling things and stuff like that, that's the kind of thing I've learned to do in Mythic Plus. Like, okay, we're going into a big pull where I'm going to pop my cooldowns. I'm going to wait until I see like the first person miss their kick, and then I'm just going to bubble and DPS for 8 seconds freely. Well, I'll still do my interrupts and stuff like that, but like DPS freely and not worry about dying for a little bit. And that's helped me out a lot. Honestly, it seems like a bit of a waste of your bubble, but it's actually helped me a lot in pushing really big numbers in Mythic Plus. But having these extra defensive abilities is just going to go so far for me, man. I'm really excited for it. I think for many fights, at least, I'll be able to try to push a higher number without like inconveniencing my team and stuff like that. And I think it just puts Ret Pally in a better place in general, right? We're the squishiest class, and we're a plate melee class, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way that they said they want it to be anymore. And so hopefully we can be, giant unkillable machines or something like that. I would, and by the way, if they never nerf Sanctify plates and we get to keep the other defensive options, then great. Like I do want to live. I do want to feel like I'm not going to die, and I don't want to be casting Word of Glory on myself during fights and stuff like that. So I would be very happy if that were the case. I just don't believe it to be the case. So that's why I was a bit triggered by those comments. I'm not going to lie about people saying that I was calling for nerfs to Paladin defensives. That is the last thing I want. I'll take a step further. I want my auto bubble back. I want my cheat death back, because that allows me to play completely freely. And I will tell you, there is nothing, and I haven't experienced it in so long, but there's nothing more free feeling than completing a mythic raid fight and not having your auto bubble proc, because that means that you did that entire fight without ever once worrying you were going to die. Not one time. As long as, if your cheat death doesn't proc, and that goes for rogues, that goes for anybody with a cheat death. If your cheat death doesn't proc, then you never once worried about dying during that fight, because you shouldn't worry about dying until after your cheat death procs. So I miss that feeling a lot. I know we're not getting that back, but I would like to take steps to get closer to that feeling. And the feeling of being able to just, DPS, do what my spec is supposed to do, and do some damage. So that's why I'm so excited about it personally. I'm not calling for nerfs when I say stuff. I'm just like saying what I think about stuff. I'm giving honest feedback. I'm giving honest thoughts about the talents and stuff like that. I want Ret to live. I want Ret to feel strong. Obviously, I want the damage to be good too, but I think the damage is already decent. It's like average or whatever, right? It's just the livability thing is kind of the issue. I think if every Ret had survivability, that you would see those DPS numbers on average maybe go up a little bit. You'd certainly see mine go up. I can pretty much guarantee that by just comparing, Legion. Now a good kill for me is like a 90 or 92, right? In Legion, the good kill for me was like a 99, just by doing it, by not worrying about dying, essentially. And I can still do 99s on early bosses where I'm not really worried about dying. But it's really hard on later bosses where the damage output, the damage taken output is so high, and the mechanical damage, unavoidable damage, is so high that I feel like I could die at any given moment. So I'm super excited about it. If nothing else, I could almost, I shouldn't say I could care less. I could almost care less about anything else as long as we get to keep all the defenses. That's where I'm at on it personally. So I want to share some personal thoughts there. I don't do this very often. But it is kind of a personal thing for me, because I do care about my performance, and the best way I personally can have good performance is by not worrying about dying. So yeah, that's it for this one, guys. A little bit of a personal video, kind of let you inside my mind a little bit. But yeah, as always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel, because that helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.